Well, hello, everyone. I am happy to be here today with the wonderful team that produced and directed the new DreamWorks feature film, Spirit Untamed. With us today, we are so fortunate to have the film's director, Elaine Bogan, the producer and the co-director, Ennio Torresan Jr., and the producer, a good friend of mine, Karen Foster. We're thrilled to be talking about this wonderful film. I watched it myself just very recently, and I very much enjoyed it. And I'm very excited to be able to ask you questions and talk about the project. And then we will be having questions come in from our viewers as well. So I think probably a great way to start is I would love each of you to tell me about your careers, how you got started in animation, how you ended up at DreamWorks. And Elaine, as the director, number one director, why don't we begin with you, please?
Sure. Well, I, started out drawing pictures and writing little storybooks when I was a really tiny little kid. And my family always just really supported and encouraged that and helped me get through art school as a young kid. And I ended up at Sheridan College, where I went for classical animation, 2D animation. From there, DreamWorks came out and recruited a roundup of us into their story trainee program, where I got my first footing in storyboarding. And then after that trainee program, I was hired on and went around on various projects, features and holiday specials and whatnot. And I was storyboarding at DreamWorks for maybe 6 or 7 years before I tried a switchover and directed in TV for 5 or 6 years. So I spent a long time directing in TV on How to Train Your Dragon TV series and Troll Hunters, Three Below. And I'm so sorry. Can you guys hear my dryer beeping? Laundry's done. So after 5 or 6 years of directing in TV, I really wanted to see what I could then take from all of that experience and apply back in feature animation. And at the time, I was looking to switch back into feature. Spirit was a project in development that was looking for a horse person.
Yay!
And I am also a horse person. So that's a bit of the journey into Spirit Untamed for me.
Fantastic. I noticed that you were DreamWorks' first female television director, which is very excited. Go!
I mean, yeah, it's so funny. At the time that it happened, I didn't even really realize it wasn't. When I look back and think about that, it's a pretty epic accomplishment, and I'm so happy about that. And it's oddly something that was never brought to a lot of people's attention, because I always just felt supported and surrounded by people who didn't, maybe it should have been a big deal, but it wasn't, because we were all just working together as equals, and it felt like a really supportive, amazing environment. And I was always very grateful for that.
Well, it's fantastic. And you're a great role model for all the other aspiring women directors out there.
Thank you.
So Ennio, you came in. I know you've been at DreamWorks for a long time as well. So please tell us about how you came to, got into the world of animation, and share with us some of your background and then how it brought you to Spirit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having us here, Sue. And I didn't know I was going to have a career in animation at all after I graduated from art college and in Brazil, Rio. I was intending to be a painter, a fine artist. And but as a fine artist, painter in Brazil, I realized I had to get a job in order to be a fine artist, a painter. So I decided the best route would be to go and be a teacher in art school, and then, try my career, because it's a long goal, right? To be a painter. It doesn't happen quickly. And I had to learn a few new materials in order to teach my the students. So one of them was animation. So I had to take a course in animation, in order to learn to teach animation. And by doing so, I ended up making a short, 30-second short that was elected by the students as being the best one. So I immediately got an offer to go and work on a short, and that completely changed my perspective in my career. And suddenly I was given a grant to do my personal short. When I did that, I sent to festivals around the world. I got an award in Annecy. I was selected to Venice Film Festival. And I went around the world with this short. And that was a long time ago because the short was done in 2D under a 35mm camera. And but that sent me to England. I worked on 3 feature films there in various departments: layout, painting, backgrounds, animation. And I got an offer to come to LA. And that's when I started to work with the big studios, and I had a chance to direct for HBO on Ralph Bakshi. I worked with Ralph Bakshi a long time ago.
I'm sure you've got stories there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, but he was nice to us. And eventually, I helped Steve Hillenburg on his first season of SpongeBob. And I went to Disney. I worked on Teacher's Pet with Bill, oh God. So sorry, I forgot your name, man.
It'll come.
Yes. Well, anyway, he was an amazing illustrator from New York. And Gary Baseman. Oh, finally.
There you go.
And then eventually I went to DreamWorks I went back to feature films because I was on TV, directing TV. And in feature films, I realized I had to really learn everything again, storyboarding again. But they liked my work, my comedy sense. So I was hired to work on the Madagascar franchise. So I worked on all the Madagascars, including the shorts. I became head of story in the shorts. And that led me to become head of story on Turbo, and then head of story on Boss Baby, on Abominable. And then these 2 ladies here saw me prancing around and tired of working straight for almost 20 years with no break. Said, well, I think you need to work with us on another. No, I need the break. Please. Then Elaine, no, come on. We need to.
Right.
And I know nothing on horses, but you have a kid, you have a daughter. It's a daughter-father relationship story. And that hooked me. I brought the idea to home, and I asked my daughter, and she went crazy. She started jumping around like a maniac. Of course, she's a fan of the show, and in fact, I have to say that she was my mentor. My daughter, she was my consultant. My son as well, and here we are.
Excellent.
I'm afraid Ennio's being a little too modest for my taste, so I'm going to jump in a little bit.
All right.
When Karen and I were, tasked with crewing up to find a crew that we thought was going to be able and capable of achieving a monumental schedule and budget for a feature film, Ennio was always, as soon as I started at DreamWorks, Ennio's been one of my heroes as far as storyboard artists go. He's one of the most creative, talented, kind, and hilarious to work with people that I know. And he's also one of the only people I would have ever trusted by my side to tackle my first feature film. So that's how he ended up with us a little bit.
And when Elaine says monumental, she means small.
Very tiny.
Short schedule. Small budget.
A much shorter schedule than most, and a much smaller budget than most. And monumental challenge is probably a better way to put it.
Well, and Karen, why don't you tell us about you and your history and what you've done there at DreamWorks?
Well, my life journey probably started in my backyard when I was 5. All I ever wanted to do was put on plays. And tell stories, and just recruiting every kid in the neighborhood. Please, I'll play the worst part if we can just do this play. And the first half of my career was in the theater, either as an actor or as a producer or costume lady, whatever I could do, that was the dream. And then at some point in my 30s, when I could see 40 on the horizon and I could see my visa bill getting bigger every month instead of smaller, and I was working for some folks that were funding a theater, but they were in their 80s and they were big drinkers and smokers. And I thought, they're going to keel over and I'm going to be unemployed.
Oh dear.
And so I asked my friends if they had an idea. I needed a new profession, and would they please let me know what that new profession was going to be. And then I stood on the sidewalk and I prayed to the heavens to show me something I could love as much as I loved the theater, which I didn't think was possible. And then a friend of mine who is a reader at Disney Feature Animation, and she's still a reader there because that's her day job and she's a theater person by night, said, "Ooh, I've recommended you for the development department." And I was like, "Great, what is that?" Because I had no idea. And before my friend steered me to animation, because I'm from Los Angeles, I remember thinking, I guess I'm going to have to work in the film industry. I wasn't excited about that. And it was like, oh, I'm going to have to do that. And then I discovered animation. I got that job all those many years ago at Disney, even though I had no idea what it was. And my friend was teaching me like, oh, this is coverage. And this is how this is what they want in notes. And I was just faking it the whole way for those 5 months of interviews over there at Disney all those years ago. And, in fact, on my first day of my job, then I thought that there's this one guy was my boss, and I found out I was his boss. That's how little I knew. But I was super lucky because Disney was run by a bunch of theater people at the time, and theater people think that other theater people are the smartest people in the world, which is probably why I got that job. And then I proceeded to learn that animation is something I love just as much as I love the theater, and more because it's actually bought me a house. And I spent 5 years at Disney in development, and then I came over to DreamWorks in development. But one of the first things I did when I started at Disney is to figure out what career trajectory I wanted. And I remember going, oh, director looks good. And somebody said, you have to be an artist. I went, oh, yeah, I'm not going to do that. What does that person do? And they're like, oh, they're a producer. Like, I'm going to do that. So, I went to DreamWorks many, many years ago. And one of the things that I did in development was help buy the book, How to Train Your Dragon. And I went to Jeffrey at the time and I said, oh, I'd like to produce this little book. And if you have any trouble with that, let me know. And he said, no trouble. And then I ended up, of course, Bonnie Arnold is the producer, but I was co-producer on that. And that is how I moved from development into production. And Sue may know this, but I had no idea what I was doing. And I learned it on the job. And Elaine was on that project all those many years ago.
Mhm.
Wow.
And one more thing I want to add is when I started at DreamWorks 18 years ago, I passed by Ennio's office. I didn't know Ennio at the time, but I saw this painting and I said, I must have that. And here it is.
Oh, no.
Oh, look.
So when Ennio says he's a painter, he is.
He is indeed.
And then all those years later, I got to make a movie with both of two of my favorite people at DreamWorks, Elaine and Ennio. And they're still my favorite people, even after this monumental schedule.
It's shocking.
Yes.
Shocking. We all still love each other.
It's amazing.
Can you share with us what the length of the schedule was? I mean, I'm just curious. I know I saw numbers about possibly budget, but I'm really curious what the schedule and whatever you can share with us.
So, Elaine, when did you come on? Do you remember?
Oh, it was probably April-ish of 2019.
Wow.
And then Ennio came on board
June. It was June.
June.
2
So
months later.
when Elaine joined, we were in her office banging out an outline and talking about what it was like to be 12. So we started with, some cards, some of these cards all on a wall, and an idea that we wanted to well, we knew that the job was to make a feature based on the TV show, not a sequel to Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron, beautiful movie, but rather a feature version for the TV show. And lots of ideas had been thrown around, and most of them felt like episodes, with the continued adventures. And both Elaine and I thought that you can't really tell the story without girl meets horse, because really a girl and her horse movie is a love story.
Yeah, and I think because we were anticipating, hopefully bringing in an audience that wasn't already familiar with the TV series too, we wanted to start the story off in a place that felt like it was a beginning for these two characters, and not something that newcomers to the franchise would have to catch up on or have seen previous episodes or parts of the series.
And we hoped for the people who did know the series that this would be the real story of what happened.
Right. Well, I watched a few of the episodes, and I had not watched the series in the past. I watched the film, and I watched a few episodes, and I feel what you did with the film is just so beautiful and compelling and impactful, and the way you bring the characters together and introduce the friendship with Lucky meeting Spirit and then becoming friends, and then, her other friends. And as the circle develops, it does feel like the origin story for the series, truly. It's beautiful. And I was really impressed. I too grew up with horses. I grew up in Colorado, and I rode American Standard bred 5-graded horses. And
wow.
And I was just amazed. Let's talk horses for a few minutes here.
Gladly.
I thought you did an amazing job of portraying the way horses' attitudes and their emotions, and how, the way the bond developed between the girl and the horse and her friends and their relationships. And I mean, it looked like I would love you to tell us a little bit about how you became so knowledgeable about horse anatomy, horse locomotion. Some of the close-ups, watching the nostrils move, and it was truly beautiful. And I know it was not rotoscoped. This was real animation, and it's so authentic.
Yes.
I would love you to tell us about it.
First, it's so pleasing and funny to me that you specifically brought up nostrils, because during animation dailies reviewing this entire movie, I became the bane of our head of animation's existence with my nostril notes. I was the nostril lady. It was nostrils and horse ears say everything you need to know about horse body language. And it was a big deal going through shots for specific body language, especially that we were dealing with a main character that didn't speak. We needed to rely fully on, obviously, body language and his emotional story coming out physically on screen. So I guess a bit about my experience with horses. I've also been riding and working around horses since I was 8 or 9 years old. And, with both horses that were fully trained and pretty green ones that, took a little bit of warming up to. And I feel like, growing up in that environment and seeing how different horses react to and connect with humans in very different ways. They're as various as people sometimes with their personalities and their approaches to communication. So I've just been around that world for a very long time. And coming into this project, at first I was a little bit skeptical that I was the right person, to be honest, because I have such a, I don't know, I'm the horse nerd coming in to make a movie for kids that's supposed to be fun and not to by the book, and that was also one of the other reasons I loved having Ennio around, is because he was sort of that balance between all of these rules and knowing horse anatomy, horse body language, how they communicate, versus, okay, but how do we make it a fun animated story that can connect to all sorts of people, especially ones that don't know horses intimately. So I feel like, Karen did a great job building that crew that had a nice sort of counterbalance in all sorts of areas, not just the horse stuff too. And And then, so when we started the project, Ennio and I, Ennio, you can talk about this too. We made sure that anyone on the crew who was going to be involved in either designing or animating or texturing or working with the horses in the movie had the experience they wanted. And we took trips to the LA Equestrian Center. I took people to meet my horse Ziggy and just mess around with them and get up close. And even just for the story artist to go and experience what it emotionally can feel like walking up to a 1,200-pound animal and asking it things, that can be a variety of emotions for a lot of people. And it was really important to us that we had our artists, at least have touched that before coming in to tell a story about it,
Mm-hmm.
We also had benefit. So Sean Sexton was our Hoka, and he's good friends with James Baxter.
Yes.
So there was some informal discussion between them. And we also dug up all the old James Baxter stuff from Spirit, all that beautiful reference and material that they put together. So we had some legacy. And of course, Lorna Cook is in the stall next to Elaine at the stable. So there was some informal help from Lorna. And we also had, what was the gentleman's name? Shamada?
Stuart Samita, the animal anatomy expert.
Yes. So he helped teach the story artists and, of course, Sean some of the basics of horse locomotion.
And
Well,
one funny thing about
please,
Sean
Ennio,
is
go
that,
ahead.
no, sorry, just to add a bit about Sean. One thing about Sean was that he the animation our supervisor, he was a little taken by the fact that it was about a horse. It's a horse movie, low budget.
Wow.
It's not just one horse, but 3 horses, and then you have the family of horses. And he was a little taken, but man, he did an amazing work with.
He didn't sleep for 2 years.
It's
So, we had someone, if I can ask the question, was this animated all at DreamWorks, or did you also have external, like an external animation studio working under your direction?
It was on at Jellyfish in London.
Oh.
And so that's why Sean didn't sleep at all. He was, as we had mentioned earlier, it was a smaller budget than a normal DreamWorks animation movie. And that was dictated by the fact that we knew that our audience would be generally younger children, possibly girls. Boys love it too, but younger children. And so that dictates the budget. And so that meant looking for a vendor. And we were super lucky to find Jellyfish for many reasons. They really dove in and were dedicated to the project. But also when we went into COVID, they were immediately flexible, and they were able to, within a week, go from being a studio in London to a studio all over the world. And actually, when we first started, Sean was hiring a lot of his former students. He does a lot of online teaching. So he was, because Jellyfish had never done a feature before, they were expanding their animation department in a large way. And that was going great, but we had, COVID was actually a benefit for us in that initially it was just, whoever's in London, and then COVID hit. And since Jellyfish was able to hire animators who could work virtually, we started being able to hire animators with more experience. And they really showed up for us, and we had some beautiful animation as a result of that, opening the doors to whomever would be interested in working on a project.
We've had several questions from our viewers about how COVID impacted the production. And it seemed, the fact that you made this movie virtually in 2 years, from start to finish, I can tell our audience of viewers, that's incredibly fast. Usually spends 2 years in development, at least, not even getting into production. So
another small reason I was a bit skeptical on coming into the project at the beginning.
We benefited.
Easy, piece of cake.
I
Done that before many
benefited from,
times.
yeah, we benefited from Elaine's television experience and Ennio's just practical understanding of what the task was. And both of them have a sense of humor about it. So we always knew what our task was. And our task was move forward.
Right, right.
And we also knew the departments well enough to know, okay, we're not going back. We're not changing it in the storyboards. We're just moving forward. And our executives, I have to say, trusted us. We kept saying, trust us, we'll do that, but we won't do it for 6 months. We're not ignoring you. We're just not doing it now because we can't. And we held hands and we moved forward.
Yeah, that was great. We saved so many torturous screenings that way because, you know, you take notes on these long formats, you take notes, you do a screening and they look at the screen, it doesn't work, let's go back to the previous one. And then you waste a lot of time. So we didn't do that. We just said, we'll do that. We'll do whatever it takes to make it work.
Yeah.
I promise you. And we did deliver, you know.
Yeah, we had one question, a question here from Zach Clairville, who asked, what were some of the most valuable tools you took from directing television animation with you into directing feature animation?
Oh my
Elaine,
goodness.
that's a good one for you.
So many.
Yeah, I mean, Ennio, you can speak to this one too. I would say every single day taught me something in TV that was completely new and different. I feel like the pace and the sort of the mechanics of directing in TV, I think within the span of those 5 or 6 years, I directed something like 56 episodes of TV or something insane like that. And because of the content we were creating, it was shows directed for people like Guillermo del Toro and Art Brown and Doug Sloan. That, you know, they're big creative leaders. And in order to get through these episodes, it was like creating little short stories. Sometimes I was directing 7 or 8 short stories at the same time, all in different departments. And it was every day became about, okay, what are the most efficient, effective decisions, making them, and then seeing them through to the end. And even if you got to the end and figured out, oh, that one back there, that we probably shouldn't have done that decision, but at the end of the day, it's going to be on TV in 2 weeks, so let's make it happen. So I think, you know, just the immediate necessity for creativity and confidence was huge in being able to even just work myself up to deciding, yes, I'm going to step into my first feature film. That was a big, scary, awesome, exciting moment. And I think if I didn't have all of that TV experience behind me, there's no way I would have stepped up to that. It was big.
From a producer's point of view, both Ennio and Elaine were super great partners because they knew what was expensive. And because we didn't have a huge budget, that was important. And they knew how they have the creativity to figure out how to focus the beauty on the screen to what was accomplishable and to avoid anything that wasn't really going to make a big difference, but was going to break the team. So not only what would be expensive, but when you have a vendor who hasn't done a feature before, there's lots of things they're learning as they go. And the difference between high quality television and a feature is still a big leap. And so it was important that our directors and the other team members as well, like Robert Crawford in layout and Sean, they knew, and effects, Sabrina Reel, who was our visual effects supervisor, they knew how to help steer our vendor toward the achievable. And not to waste time and money on things that just weren't that important. And
you know, the funniest example I can think of as far as creative problem solving goes is probably at the very beginning of the movie where we hear an elephant off screen and Lucky shouts, "An elephant?" We don't actually see it because we couldn't afford to build the asset. So creative problem solving is something that we use every day in television that was so it saved us in being able to accomplish the other bigger scenes and things that we really knew we wanted in this movie and to spend a lot of money on making it look really great, we compromised in other ways.
Like, for example, the scene where Abigail is doing her shadow puppets.
Yes.
Originally, those were built characters that you cut to, and Elaine was like, and we're like, we've gone through our animal building quotient and or quota, and Elaine's like, shadow puppets. So we were in.
Shadows were something we used a lot in Troll Hunters, and I think it was just always in the back of my mind. Also, Ennio and I knew we wanted to build a really big, expensive set piece that we hadn't told anyone about at that point yet. So it was all about weeding out the stuff we didn't necessarily need.
Yeah, and many times we went on and we placed those expensive set pieces in the movie, and which freaked a lot of people out. But Elaine and I knew, that was just a temporary a band-aid to the story, because you have to be confident enough to understand that, and eventually we'll change it, we'll drop that as long as as a better idea comes along. So for the time being, we knew we had to deal with all these expectations, and Tim, our line producer, Tim Power, yeah, he who come to us and to me and said, we can't do that. We can't afford that stuff. And I said, Tim, don't worry. We're not going to do that. We're just going to keep it here for now. And then eventually something fantastic will replace it. But for now, let's keep it. And he was still not confident in us until, we replaced it with a fantastic version of that scene. I'm talking about the stampede scene with 5,000 elks. And that was
Not
replaced, not in the movie, but it was replaced by the Ridge of Regret, which was a silent scene piece, which is magical. So that one replaced the stampede of elks. And from that day on, I remember Tim saying, well, our schedule's pretty tough, but I think in this team, I trust this team. They can accomplish the movie. So he was very confident towards us after seeing how we worked.
Yeah, I think that's another really big thing that I feel is translated over from TV in a much bigger way than I ever thought. I mean, obviously, making a feature in 2 years is no small task, but it really highlighted the idea that I learned in TV that every single person on that floor, everyone on that crew is crucial in order to get where you need to go at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And, it shouldn't take any reminding, but it's just the idea that I am not here to do everything myself. We need a crew, and we have this crew because every single person on it is extremely good at what they do, and just allowing them to do it and add their creative voice into every single shot was an amazing experience. And now, because of that, now when I watch the movie, every single shot feels like a little postcard from every single person on that crew who had their hands in there. And it's beautiful. I love that about animation.
When Ennio, you mentioned the Ridge of Regret sequence, I thought that was so beautiful. First of all, I think in the film you did an amazing job of utilizing, beautiful, the backgrounds are beautiful, and you've got CG sets, but then you're using like matte paintings or backdrops, which are gorgeously painted. The art direction is stunning.
Paul Duncan.
Yeah, Paul Duncan.
Beautiful. And on the Ridge of Regret, I made a little note when I was watching that, because often in like important action sequences or something in a movie, it's more about all the action. But in this, it was, a very dangerous, scary sequence, yet it combined the character, the girls having to close their eyes, like Lucky, closing her eyes and trusting Spirit. Because that's what with horses you have to do. You have to trust them. They know they're more sure-footed than we humans who are always trying to control. And I just thought that was such a beautiful sequence, and it was so powerful through that. It was just really amazing. Everyone, you're going to enjoy watching this movie. Everybody watching has to see this film because it's really beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, every action. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go on, Ennio.
Just to complete there what Sue was pointing out, every major action sequence and chase sequence needs to be about something, needs to have a reason, emotional reason. If there isn't one, then it should be completely dropped from the movie. And once you have that emotional, moment featured in a scene, and that's not a chase scene, it sometimes becomes stronger. It's way stronger.
Absolutely. It was beautiful. Something else I would love you to talk a bit about is the music. I felt the scope of the music was amazing and just so beautiful. And the composer, Amy Doherty, is that correct? Doherty? DreamWorks first
female composer for a feature.
Yes.
First feature, wow. It was her first feature film.
For a feature film.
Yeah, first
amazing.
Feature film of hers.
It's a beautiful score. I would love you to explain a bit, some of, from the director's points of view, some of your thoughts about the music and some of the guidance you gave her.
Sure. I mean, Ennio, jump in, but when we initially brought Amy in for the first conversations about the film, it was a big goal for both Ennio and I to, create a movie that had storytelling elements in every piece of making that film. And by that, I mean, not just by what the characters were running around saying on screen or what they were doing or this order of events, but by way of telling a story with the color, with the evolution of design, and particularly with Amy's music. And that's sort of how we launched her into the story, is that we wanted, we first ultimately asked her to, go away and write specific signature themes for each character, so that every time a character either grows or evolves, that piece of music grows or evolves in some way with them, so that we're hearing the story as well, not just seeing it. And, I think from those initial conversations, one of the biggest challenges we threw at her right away, and I ended up feeling kind of bad for the poor woman, but was, okay, we need an epic, memorable, incredible theme song for this fearless young woman. But we don't only need one version, we need multiple versions in different tones and emotions that will resurface throughout the score, like everything. It's going to be all over this movie, but we need it to be the same song so that we know Lucky's remembering her mother. And that ended up being the theme song, Fearless. And that was her first big challenge. And it felt like she went away for 2 weeks, wrote something, came back, played it for us. And I don't know about Ennio and Karen, but it felt like that was the song that was already in all of our heads. And she owned it, and her sound became just as big of a storytelling element in this movie as anything else did. She was integral in coming on board.
When we were looking for that song, the Universal Music Department had given us like 20 potential songs that people had submitted. And Amy said, "Oh, I'd like to do one too." And then hers was just so obviously the movie. And then she confessed she'd never written a song before.
That's it. She had never written a song or lyrics for a song before. This was her first shot, and that was her first pass.
So the fearless. She was the fearless one.
And we didn't change anything. It was exactly as she composed. She is
That's amazing.
Unbelievable. She was unbelievable.
And then it became our theme.
Yeah.
Right. We knew our basic story, but we didn't know our exact theme. And then once we got that song, it became the thematic element, the strongest thematic element in the movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I loved that song. And I was picking up throughout the film that theme that just kept weaving through being fearless. And even from the Lucky's story and her friends, but then the father, he has to then let go and become fearless and allow his daughter. It was just really beautiful the way you wove that together, and the way you had, and that probably comes from your experience in television, also being able to tell many stories all at once, the way you have the Lucky's story and the father-daughter story and the girl and the horse story, of all these different stories weaving together into this beautiful tapestry.
Oh, that's beautiful. That makes me very happy to know that that was communicating on some level.
It was. It was. Are there any of the other themes of the film that you would like to share with us or explain?
Ennio?
Well, it's about no, it's
What about herds?
There's like
What about a
a
herd?
family.
Herd.
It's about family as well.
there's two steps forward, one step back. They're joined up. There's lots of different.
And you can come up with jokes on those thematic statements as well. One step forward, 50 steps back, like Al does. So everything was used in this movie. We didn't waste any idea, and we always paid back. The setups we.
When we were trying to figure out Act Two, we wrote down what we needed to accomplish. And we did lots and lots of work, lots of sequences from boarding artists, lots of things. And it wasn't all gelling and it was super expensive. And then Elaine came back from a weekend and said, I wrote this little song that I think might help for the montage. And as a result of the joined up song that Elaine wrote, she kind of solidified our thematic for Act Two, because we wanted the girls to join up with each other and we wanted Lucky to join up with her horse. And that was essentially the need for that journey over the mountains. And she brought it with that song, and also the idea for the old-fashioned cowboy montage where the background is changing. That was just over the weekend we solved a huge problem and created that thematic element.
There were a lot of times I went back to the TV roots of that creative problem solving stuff. And that montage had been something that was kicking our butts for a long time. How are we going to get this into the box? How are we going to afford building all sorts of different locations and seeing these girls traveling through environments we don't have the time to build and all this stuff. So Ennio and I sat down, and what both Ennio and I really love that we were able to reference in this movie are all those old classic Western films that we grew up watching. And that a huge part of the reason we're probably both on this project is our love of that style of film. So, we heavily leaned on the old green screen trick with three cowboys walking towards camera and a screen in the background, changing locations. Simple, also super cheap in animation.
Although that, Paul would say it was challenging.
It's challenging. Cheap is also challenging.
Yeah. Well, he did it in a very creative, artistic way where he wanted each element in the background to transform into a tree in the background would transform and dissolve into a rock in the next location. So it did become a lot more artistic and creative than we originally set out. And that's the genius of Paul Duncan, made that scene really shine. But yeah, it's a lot of these sort of happy accidents sort of happened along the way. And it was because of everyone's, just passion to get this thing done.
Yeah. But also the tone of the movie, it's very much in line with the first movie. And in terms of cinematography, that's why we hired Robert Crawford, who worked on the first movie as a layout artist, and I think he was head of layout in that, and also, bringing back to the TV show, we had to economize on our shots, and a lot of stuff was done, on a wide shot. Was either master shot or wide shots, and all this information, all these jokes would be happening at the same time. We would never cut to a payoff in a joke. It wouldn't be a punch, and laugh like a lot of animation nowadays are built on, the jokes are built on punchline reaction shots. So we didn't use that. We threw all that stuff out of the window. We tried to reinvent the language of our movie, the grammar, the cinematographical grammar of our movie, by using the influences that Elaine was referring to, like old Westerns, where you had a locked camera and it would move and things would have to happen right in front of you. And of course we have a dynamic camera as well that it's more sophisticated than just a locked tripod camera. But we tried to do as much as we could on a wide on things that were happening at the same time. Jokes, many jokes that were happening at the same time. When the one that I'm talking about also is when Snips shows up with Donkey to tell Dad and Al what happened, and at the same time there's a guy in the background stealing the posters that were referring to the bad guys, as Al is talking about. I've seen that guy before, as he takes the post. So all that stuff had to be very well choreographed in animation. We tried to do that in boards. We didn't have time to board this movie a lot. We did a lot of thumbnails. Elaine and I were thumbnailed the hell out of this movie, sent it to editorial to see if we could time that correctly.
And often those thumbnails went straight to layout.
Yes.
Yeah, and then our executives had to watch a screening of thumbnails.
Trust us, we'll do it in 6 months.
Yeah.
At the very end of the movie, when the executives wanted something fancier in the credits, Ennio was drawing while we were in the mixing sessions. He was drawing all the drawings that show up in the credits.
So my iPad, I had my iPad and was drawing the end credits only because
At the final mix.
Yeah, we didn't have time.
Wow.
And I would export that drawing to Orlando, who was there in the mixing section and editing the movie at the same time. So we would import that, put in there, and play in a big theater, and okay, it works.
It works. Next.
I like that. I really like that technique you had in the end credits, where the image, and then it was like it would go to the sketch version of it.
Those are Ennio's.
That was all Ennio.
And it was wonderful. And it also felt, it kind of married together. All right, this is the CG film, but it's sort of heritage or hearkening back to the 2D original Spirit film.
Yes.
And then the use of the zoetrope with the mother on the horse, and when that would spin and you'd see like that 2D animation of the mother on the horse. I love the way you had those little 2D bits in there it felt like it bridged those films together. Awesome. Like it felt like one big family.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that zoetrope element was something that Ori Wallington had included in one of her very first drafts. And I remember reading the draft for the first time, and I just instantly latched onto that zoetrope. There was something about it that, obviously, as an animation person, that just spoke to me on many different levels, because there are so many different things you can do with them. And it became a big part of the evolution of Lucky by way of reconnecting with her mother, and then, her recreating that same image on the platform, galloping to jump across onto the boat. She becomes Milagro in the zoetrope in a way. And it had always been such a big visual thematic from the very beginning, and it just stuck. And I think, animation people making an animated movie about animated things was what we all really loved about it.
Yeah. We have to praise Gary Graham for boarding that sequence.
Oh my gosh.
He was just
we have to praise him for boarding everything.
All of it.
Yes. He boarded a lot in this movie. And
we had an amazing crew of board artists who started really with an outline, and some, like our final sequence where Lucky says goodbye to Spirit, that was drawn by Karen
McAllister.
She was an apprentice at the beginning of the movie, and essentially what she drew and wrote is in the final movie. But the great Gary Graham, we would launch him on all the most complicated sequences, and for the final sequence on the boat at the docks, when he started, we said, "This is our set design." I don't know if you can see it, but this line is the dock, and that's the boat. And he said, "All right."
Yeah.
And that was what we gave him, because
we went away and came back with this epically dynamic action scene with 14 horses and about 15 men and 3 kids. And oh my gosh, it was we ended up only being able to use about half of it. This is how he just went for it. And I wish we could have made everything Gary boarded, because it was all stunning and gorgeous, but we were only allowed 72 minutes of screen time.
Yes. But he was a lifesaver, like most valuable player. It's incredible.
Well, that ending, that sequence of the big ultimate kind of battle or whatever you want to call it, fight, action sequence on the boat, as the girls are overpowering and beating the crafty, nasty yet funny cowboys, the bad guys. It was so much fun, and I could watch as I was watching. I could see how it was truly choreographed. All that sequence with the horses, and then bang, one ding, and then the next. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. We have a question from. I guess I should ask some of the questions from our friends who are watching today. Carrie Kopich is asking, did any aspects from your childhood memories inform the kids' personalities and motivations?
Oh, nice one, Carrie.
Well done.
I would have to say the character that I feel childhood Elaine most resonates with is Abigail. And I think it's because most of the horses that I had growing up were very much big lapdog golden retrievers like Boomerang. And it was just that, when you're out hanging around with horses, it's very much about being in the moment, because if you're not, you can get very seriously injured. And that's kind of the spirit we infused into Abigail. Was she represents just living in the moment, doing whatever you feel like, and not necessarily worrying about consequence or reaction. And so that character always kind of spoke to me. What about you, Ennio?
Oh man, I would say Snips. Snips is me as a kid, and my son as well. And I was tapping on my son and my daughter a lot in this movie. And there are moments when Lucky reacts to her dad. That's just like my daughter reacts to me. Some moments. I'm so glad everyone allowed me to put, exactly as I experienced, some of the fights that I had with my daughter. Well, it's not fights, but disagreements and
for me, Karen will always remind me of Cora, and the reason is because ever since we started the project, when we had to start putting storyboard reels together to show screenings of sequences or certain acts that we were screening for the execs, Karen would very kindly do scratch record for Aunt Cora. And that happened probably for the first year of the filmmaking. And she very much became Cora. And I didn't want the day to come that we had to replace her, because it was just so much fun. Karen, what do you think? What do you feel like you?
Well, yes, I did bring a lot to the screen for Aunt Cora. But I think the question was about childhood. And when I was 12, I moved from one part of Los Angeles to another. I moved from Altadena to Malibu. And it's not quite the same as moving from Philadelphia to the East Coast, but it was a major culture shock. It was a foundational earthquake for me. And I got a dog, and I was begging for a dog at that time. And so for me, the things that were like sort of some foundational understanding of Lucky and her journey were this displacement at that age and the desire to fall in love with an animal. And that when I had no friends, that dog was my friend.
Oh, nice.
Oh.
Nice.
So there was that.
What was your dog's name?
Cora.
No.
What? Cora?
I didn't
That's
have it
weird.
together until just now.
Wow, you never told us about that.
Cora.
That's amazing.
Amazing.
And the dog came to us in the wild because we were going to go to a, you don't need to hear all this, but I'll tell you anyway. We were going to go to a pound the next day to get me a dog that I'd been begging for. And that night there was a big storm. And early in the morning, there was a scratch on the door. And there was this wet Labrador setter sitting on our porch. And that was our dog.
Cora.
Well, let's ask. I'm going to ask a couple more questions. We're getting low on time, but if you're okay with staying with us a few more minutes. Steve Lipton asked, why did you make this with CG instead of hand drawn like the first movie? except the zoetrope animation.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, but the TV show is CG, right? And
show is CG.
yeah, so it's mostly because we're doing like Karen said, we're doing a feature, you know, a movie off of the TV show, and not a second spirit based on the first spirit that was done 20 some years ago. But we
I think too,
borrowed.
if we had attempted a project like this in 2D, there's no way we would have made our deadline. We only had 2
Yeah.
years to make this thing. And
I mean, I know Sue will know in particular, in so much as you have a 2D company yourself. I think that the challenge of making this movie in 2D and trying to make it anywhere in the neighborhood of the beauty of the first movie, that's also part of the challenge of the comparison. The first movie had 5 years,
Right.
and certainly a exponentially larger budget than we had. And I think if we went in 2D, we really would have looked like the
It would be,
poor stepchild of that beautiful
stick
movie.
horses.
yeah, or it would have been a short movie. It would have been a short movie.
A very short movie.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been a feature film at all.
Yeah.
Or would be seeing it in 2025, maybe.
Yeah.
So it would have been so exciting. I mean, 2D
Yeah.
is so much fun.
Yeah.
And it would have been beautiful, but I don't think it was possible to do a 2D movie and do it justice in the time and the budget that we had. But also because the TV show is CG, there was this kind of dictate to do it that way.
But we tried to do, as between, you know, placed here and there some nice 2D moments, like the zoetrope, and the zoetrope was animated in 2D, and
that was nice. That was nice. Yeah, you had your little 2D moments combined in there.
Yeah, but 2D is awesome.
Yeah, we love it.
Oh, it is.
Love it.
Yeah.
Now we have a question from Mark Walton, and Mark, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to
Hey, Mark.
abbreviate the question a little bit. He has to. It's a paragraph. I know some things you've already answered, but you can just kind of touch on this. He says, "Hey, Elaine, Ennio, and Karen."
Hello, Mark.
He said, "I was curious if you had any contact with any of the animators or other artists that worked on the original feature as to how they dealt with the horse anatomy, emoting, movement, etc., and the tone of the feature. Or did you purposely want this film to be its own thing, completely separate from the previous feature in terms of look, acting, tone, etc., and have it more tied to the TV series?" It's a long question.
Yeah, want to start that one, Elaine?
Sure. So I think, yes, a bit of both of those. We very much had a job in front of us to create a feature film that came off the heels of the television series. So we already had given to us a set of characters, a world, and a general tone with which we had to service. But saying that, all of us on the crew, including some people who had also worked on the first feature film, had very
Paul Duncan, right?
Paul Duncan and Robert
William Salazar. William
Yeah.
Salazar was an animator on
William.
the film, and we used him in storyboarding.
There were a lot of elements that we wanted to pay homage to. And, you know, one example I could think of is our head modeler, Brian Jeffcoat, spent weeks and late nights studying and building our horse models after the 2D model sheets that James Baxter had drawn for the first film. So we, you know, there were elements in every part of the making of that were inspired by the first film, but knowing we had to continue on with creating something from the TV series was our task.
We also dug up all the maquettes, which were also very useful for Brian and for the animators and for the story artists.
Yeah, Spirit looks like his grandfather or father, and you know, they look alike. They come from the same genetic pool of design work.
And as I mentioned, we dug up all the James Baxter reference and the 2D different
Sheets,
reference that we had, and we had some old video from that time, a class that James Baxter taught. So we did everything we could to reach back in time and to take advantage of the people that were still at DreamWorks who wanted to work on the movie that had that foundation from the first movie. But as we all have said before, it was really about the TV series. So we tried to do some kind of bridge to the extent that we could.
Yeah, we had to be very inventive, Sue.
Yeah.
Because we had to respect the time, the budget, and
Right.
what we had in hand, and COVID hit us as well. So
Yeah.
it was challenging.
Quite an undertaking. You know, something that I'm going to mention something kind of techie. Something I just thought was gorgeous, and keeping in mind your limited budget. The fur, the horse fur, the sense they felt soft. They had a gleam to them. They felt velvety. Those nostrils, those muzzles, you know, it just felt like you could reach out and stroke them. It was the way the lighting and the fur was handled, and the texturing was really beautiful.
Oh,
and
that's
kudos
awesome.
on that, because I know that is challenging.
Thank you. Yeah. Sabrina Regal and Paul Duncan spent so much time and effort working with our vendors to get a groom and a texture on the horses. That ended up being a mega challenge for us on this project. Also, we didn't just have one horse, we had 20 of them running around, sometimes all on screen together. And just the amount of sim for that hair was an epic undertaking for Sabrina and her team of CFX artists. But that, even stuff like that, started out with, you know, we took the whole team over to the LA Equestrian Center, and we brought a horse out and let Sabrina and Paul and people like Mike Hernandez and Lauren Aris, our costume designer, get right up close, because on a horse, they don't just have hair that grows one direction. Every part of that body, the hair direction changes and sculpts around the musculature and the anatomy of that horse. And that was something that Paul was really dedicated to as well. So he worked really closely with Sabrina and CFX to achieve a look that they felt honored the rest of the style of the movie enough.
And Sabrina, our advantage with that is that this was her first VFX job, but she spent the bulk of her career in surfacing and heading surfacing for DreamWorks for years. So she really, she brought with her an enormous skill set and had worked closely with Paul Duncan in the past. And so they were a real unit. And together they were able to achieve that, of course, with the directors and Elaine's expertise on horses in the first place.
Well,
we have to give a big a big hi to our lighting department, which was able to light the movie in, I don't know, a couple of months, and which achieved that amazing look and amazing light, and the shine that would reflect on surface of the horses. It's just it's dumbfounding, you know, to think about it.
Yeah, well, it was fantastic. You know, I know we are about out of time. I wanted to mention that, you know, I love near the end of the film your little theme, which I think it fits. I'm going to say this little quote that from the movie, and I feel for all of us as artists and art lovers and everyone in their unique professions and aspirations. There was that little statement that Lucky says to Spirit. She goes, when she's saying goodbye to him, she says, "Your herd needs you, and my herd needs me too." Yeah. I love that. We here, my husband, my friends at my studio, we always say as artists, we have our tribe or our herd, and we may feel a little out of sync in the world with other people, but when we find our herd, that's our family. We're all together. And I just love that quote that you had integrated into the film. I thought was just perfect.
Yeah, it was nice. And Isabella Merced, when she delivered that line with the emotional charge that scene was needed, we just cried. We were like in tears. This was a movie that made me tear up the most in all the movies I ever worked on. I was tearing up like an idiot, and because of all these amazing emotional moments that were so true to us.
And when,
Tearing up in a good way, not because we were making
Yeah.
the movie in 2 years.
when Amy first delivered her first pass of music on that, she had two themes. One was Lucky and her sadness, and the other one was Spirit, who was sort of happy because he'd found. And we're like, this is all from Lucky's point of view. Turn up the tears.
Yes, change the music to her point of view.
Yeah,
The importance of having points of view in the thematic, of the music is just so important.
So she really brought it.
It had me crying. Someone came in my office as I was watching it, and these tears in my eyes. And they went, "Is everything okay?" Yes, it's this wonderful movie.
We were all fortunate enough to be able to live stream in and watch Amy conducting the live orchestra at Abbey Road Sound Studios.
Oh, wow.
And at this particular record, when they were laying down the string section for the goodbye scene, they had finished one take of that section of score, and one of the violinists stood up on a break in tears saying, "I haven't even seen the beginning of the movie yet, and I'm in tears." And she was just playing the violin for it. Like, she hadn't even seen the movie. So I feel like what Amy brought to that scene, it took it to a different emotional level that we couldn't have achieved without that sound.
That's fabulous. Well, I just can't thank you enough for joining us today and telling us about all your journey of creating Spirit Untamed and bringing it to the big screen. And I know everyone from ASIFA-Hollywood and everyone who watches this will enjoy hearing what you have to say. And hopefully everybody goes and watches the movie. And I'd just like to really thank Elaine Bogan, Ennio Torresan, and Karen Foster for joining us today. It was really a special afternoon to have this discussion with you.
Oh, thanks so much, Sue. That was so much fun.
Yeah, thanks,
Such
Sue.
a pleasure, and so good to see you and Frank and Mark back there. Thank you, everyone at ASIFA. And
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Say bye-bye.
Thanks for the great questions too, you guys.
Yes, it was